He loved his brother's widow, but what Faith whispered changed everything. Before we begin, if this story touches your soul, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional real-life stories of love, loss, and redemption. Stories that remind us that even in darkness, grace still shines. The rain fell like shattered glass against the tall windows of St. Augustine's church. The city outside was a blur of lights and loneliness, its reflections trembling on the wet pavement. Inside, a man sat alone in the last pew, his fingers locked together, trembling slightly, as if the silence around him was too heavy to hold. His name was Ethan Ward, 32 years old, a successful architect, calm to the world but breaking within. Tonight, his eyes were fixed on the altar, not for prayer, but for memory. Because this was where he first met her. Grace, not just a woman, but the woman he was never meant to love. She had been his brother's wife. And though fate had ripped his brother away years ago, the world had never forgiven Ethan for what came after. He exhaled shakily, closing his eyes. God, I didn't plan this, you know I didn't. The whisper vanished into the echo of the empty church. The candles flickered, as if the air itself had listened. 3 years earlier, everything had been different. Ethan had been the best man at his brother Daniel's wedding, a golden evening in June. Laughter echoing through marble halls, light catching Grace's hair like fire. She was gentle, intelligent, graceful, exactly as her name. Ethan remembered how Daniel looked at her that night, pride and love in his eyes. And Ethan had smiled, hiding the smallest, strangest ache that bloomed quietly in his heart. But he buried it, he had to, and for years, life went on as it should. Dinners, family holidays, phone calls that ended with laughter. Until the accident. Daniel was gone in a heartbeat. A highway crash on a rainy night, a call at 2:17 a.m., and the sound of Grace's scream tearing through Ethan's phone like a blade. He never forgot that scream. In the weeks that followed, Ethan moved into silence. He was the one who handled the funeral, the paperwork, the endless condolences. Grace barely spoke. She moved like a ghost through her own apartment, surviving only on memories and tea gone cold. One night, when everyone else had gone, she looked at Ethan across the candlelit living room and said quietly, "He always said you were the stronger one." Ethan shook his head. He was wrong. Her eyes had softened. That was the first time he'd seen her cry, not from pain, but from memory. What began as comfort became something unspoken. The late night calls, the shared grief, the long walks where silence said more than words ever could. Until one evening, without meaning to, Ethan reached out and brushed a tear from her cheek, and neither of them stepped back. It was wrong. They both knew it, but grief makes strange thieves of the heart. Weeks turned to months, and though they tried to hide, people saw. When Grace's mother found out, she refused to speak to her. Ethan's relatives called it betrayal, sin, blasphemy. "You're in love with your brother's widow," his uncle had shouted once. "You think God approves of that?" And maybe that was the hardest part. Ethan didn't know. For nights he couldn't sleep, flipping through pages of scripture, searching for answers, looking for light in words written long before his time. Some verses spoke of mercy, others of law, but none spoke of this. Of love that wasn't planned, wasn't desired, but still felt like truth. Grace tried to end it. Twice. Once by silence, and once by leaving the city altogether. She took a job offer in another town, left without goodbye, leaving Ethan with only a note, maybe one. Day God will forgive us for feeling what we can't unfeel. For 6 months, Ethan wandered through his own life like a shadow. Work became mechanical, friends drifted, the city turned gray, and faith, the faith he once leaned on, felt like a locked door. Until one winter evening, as he passed by the same church where Daniel's funeral was held, he saw light inside. He walked in without knowing why, and there, in the corner pew, knelt a priest he'd never met before. Father Collins. He looked up, calm and patient. "You look like someone who's been arguing with heaven." Ethan managed a broken laugh. "Maybe heaven's already decided." The priest studied him, then said, "Or maybe you've been asking the wrong question." They talked for hours. About love, about sin, about whether God could ever accept a love born from loss. And that night, Ethan didn't find answers, but he found a path. He began studying faith, not as a punishment, but as a journey. He learned how some interpretations condemned his feelings, while others saw them through mercy. How laws existed to protect, but mercy existed to heal. When Grace finally returned the following spring, they met again, in the same park where she once said goodbye. She looked older, quieter. "I heard you've been going to church," she said. "I had to," Ethan replied. "I needed to know if what I feel is a sin or a wound." "And what did you find?" He hesitated. "That maybe love isn't something we choose, but what we do with it, that's what defines us." She looked away, tears trembling in her eyes. "People will never accept us, Ethan." "I know," he whispered. "But I don't need everyone to. Just you. And maybe him." It took 2 more years, of patience, of quiet endurance, of proving through kindness that their love wasn't rebellion, but redemption. Ethan worked with community charities, Grace volunteered in hospitals. Slowly, the whispers faded. And when Father Collins finally agreed to officiate a small private blessing, not a legal ceremony, but a prayer for peace, Ethan realized faith wasn't about permission. It was about understanding. They never called it marriage, but they called it home. In their small apartment overlooking the city, they built a life out of gentleness. A love born in tragedy, yet sustained by grace, fittingly, her name. And though the world never fully accepted them, Ethan found peace in knowing that love, in its truest form, isn't about rules or rebellion. It's about the courage to be honest, with yourself, with faith, with the people who matter. Years later, when Ethan returned to St. Augustine's church, the same one where he now sat alone, remembering everything, he wasn't praying for forgiveness. He was giving thanks, for the chance to have loved, even when love was forbidden. For the mercy that turned pain into peace. For the woman who taught him that sometimes, the heart can lead where even faith hesitates. The rain slowed. Outside, the city glowed beneath the streetlights. Ethan rose, slipped his hands into his coat pockets, and smiled faintly. Somewhere, he imagined, Grace was smiling too. Because love, real love, had finally found its place. He whispered softly, "Thank you." And as he stepped out into the night, the church bells rang, not in warning, but in blessing. Years passed quietly, like gentle waves smoothing the edge of a once rough shore. Ethan and Grace learned how to build peace out of small, ordinary days, early mornings spent watching sunlight pour through their apartment windows, evenings filled with the sound of the kettle and the faint hum of the city below. The world had not forgotten their story, but the noise had softened. People moved on. Scandals fade faster than truth. Ethan had kept working, as an architect, pouring his heart into designs that reached upward, cathedrals of glass and light, places where people might look up and feel hope again. Grace began teaching art at a children's center near the river, where kids who had lost parents came to paint their worlds back in color. Every Friday, they still went to St. Augustine's. They never asked for anything, only sat in silence. Sometimes Father Collins would join them, not as a priest but as a friend. Peace, he told them once, doesn't mean forgetting the storm. It means learning to dance while it rains. But peace is never permanent. It's something you must choose again and again. One winter, a new developer purchased the block where the children's center stood. The plan was to tear it down for luxury apartments. Grace fought back with petitions and meetings, but her name still carried whispers from the past. Some said, "The woman who married her husband's brother, what right does she have to speak of morality?" Ethan saw how those words bruised her. He remembered the nights when she stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. "Maybe they're right," she murmured once. He held her hand gently. "If love led us here, maybe love can lead them somewhere better." So he designed something new, a plan for a community hall that would preserve the children's space on the lower floors, with sustainable housing above. He poured every ounce of his skill into it, a structure shaped like open hands. Grace named it the Haven. When the proposal went before the city council, the hall was packed. Reporters whispered, cameras flashed. Ethan stood before them, voice steady but heart pounding. "I know my name carries a story many of you disapprove of," he said. "But buildings, like people, deserve second chances. The Haven isn't just walls and glass. It's forgiveness in architecture." Silence hung heavy. Then one councilwoman asked softly, "Forgiveness, for you, or for us?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Both." The project was approved. During construction, volunteers from all over the city came to help, some of them the same people who had once criticized them. Grace painted murals with the children, fields of gold, doves rising from broken stones. When the haven finally opened, the mayor attended the ribbon cutting and, before the cameras, said, "Sometimes love breaks tradition only to build compassion." That night, Ethan and Grace returned home late. The apartment smelled of paint and flowers. They stood by the window, watching their reflection against the skyline. "Do you think they've really forgiven us?" she asked. Ethan looked at her softly. "Maybe forgiveness isn't something they give. Maybe it's something we live." Years slipped by quietly. Streaks of gray threaded through Ethan's hair. Grace's laughter grew softer but deeper. Every Sunday, the children at the haven would still run to greet Miss Grace and Mr. Ethan. In those moments, neither of them felt like outcasts anymore. They felt like roots in a garden that had finally learned to bloom again. One spring evening, Father Collins grew ill. The hospital called. Ethan and Grace hurried to his bedside. The old man smiled weakly. "Remember when you came to me with questions about sin?" Ethan nodded. "I never had the answers," the priest whispered. "But watching you two, maybe I didn't need them. You became the answer yourselves." He passed peacefully 2 days later. At his memorial, Ethan stood by the altar where everything had begun. The same church, the same pews, but the air felt different, warmer, alive. Grace rested her head on his shoulder. "He changed everything for us," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "No, he just showed us how to change ourselves." When they stepped outside, the bells rang once more, echoing across the city. The sound mingled with traffic and laughter, a strange harmony that felt like life itself. In time, the haven grew into more than a building. It became a refuge for anyone who had ever been told their love was wrong, their path forbidden, their hearts mistaken. On the anniversary of its founding, the city council unveiled a plaque, "Built in faith, sustained by grace." Ethan traced the engraved words with his fingers. "They used your name," he said softly. Grace smiled. "No, Ethan, they used his." One autumn night, many years later, when the leaves burned gold outside their window, Ethan found himself alone once more in St. Augustine's. Grace had passed quietly in her sleep that morning, her hands folded over her chest, a faint smile still on her lips. He lit a single candle and sat in the pew where he had once questioned everything. He didn't cry. His eyes were simply too full of memory. "Thank you," he whispered, "to God, to Grace, to the years that had remade him." He thought of the verse Father Collins once read to him. "Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things." Outside, the rain began again, gentle and steady. It tapped against the stained glass like a lullaby. Ethan closed his eyes and listened, his heart full, not of regret, but of a peace that felt eternal. And when the final candle flickered out, the darkness wasn't frightening anymore. It was warm, like a curtain drawing closed after the end of a long, beautiful play. Because love had found its place, beyond judgment, beyond time, beyond even the need to be understood. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more real, emotional tales of love, loss, and hope. Because sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones that remind us we're all human.